Today seems like the perfect day to show you how to make my favorite dinner. We're going to make elk roast. If you want, you can replace elk with venison or beef, whatever you have on hand, but we like to use elk. So right now I'm using a frozen roast. You can use a thawed one, it just won't take as long to cook. So put it in the crock pot. Turn it on low. Add some onion. Next, we're adding a couple of cups of water. It doesn't have to be exact, you just want to cover the bottom of the pan. We're going to make lots of gravy. Also, we're going to add a couple of beef bouillon cubes. You can use any kind that you want to. Next, we're adding oregano, salt, garlic and onion powder, I will also be adding granulated garlic. This may seem like large amounts, but we want to put in all the seasoning now because later we'll be adding our vegetables. And then we're also going to add in a large amount of onion granules. Next, we're adding Marmite. Marmite is my secret ingredient. It's a holdover from my English family. It adds the perfect flavor to all of my gravies and especially my roast. You don't have to add this. It's not necessary, but we sure love it. As you can see, it's very sticky. Then put the lid on. Put the lid on and cook it on high for about 5 hours. Then we're going to add our vegetables in. We don't want to add our vegetables in too soon or they'll become mushy. They only take about 4 hours to cook. I like to leave the crock pot on for about an hour or two on that high temperature, and then I turn it down to low for the rest of the time. Your crock pot may have different settings, so you'll have to check it out and work with it. We also like to add celery for flavor, carrots, and potatoes. You could, of course, alternate this with any root crop, such as turnips, rutabagas, kohlrabi, anything you can think of. Don't cut your vegetables too small because that will cause them to become mushy. We're going to cut all of these vegetables into nice large chunks. Once all your veggies are chopped, you're going to place them sort of in a circle around the roast. You want to get them into that liquid. That's where all the flavor is. Now at this point, my roast has been cooking for about 5 hours. We're giving it between 8 to 10 hours total. I like to prepare it in the morning before we have a busy evening ahead of us. This is a great, simple dinner. Once you have the veggies in, replace the lid and continue cooking on low. After it's cooked for about 10 hours, I like to take out all of that good broth. And I'm going to be using this to make our gravy. You do not have to do this. You could serve it as is, but we like to have a nice thick gravy to go along with ours. Now it's time to prepare the gravy. I turn the burner on to medium heat and then I add butter. I don't really go by a measurement system, but generally for a family of 4, I would say about 2 tablespoons of butter. Once the butter is melted, I add in a couple of dessert spoons of flour. You don't want to add too much because you don't want it to become too thick. So just pay attention to the consistency here. It's a little runny. I'm going to add in just a little bit more flour. I know what my end goal is and how much I want. That's perfect. Now we're very slowly going to be adding our liquid. This is the broth that we pulled out of the stew earlier. It's still very hot, so it boils quickly. You want to make sure you stir very quickly to incorporate it and not add too much at a time. If you add too much or you don't stir quickly enough, then you will create lumps, and we don't want a lumpy gravy. I've shown you this method before when we made homemade mac and cheese together. I can link the card if you're interested in watching that video. This is the base to almost all of our sauces in this house. This is the way my mom taught me to do it, and I find it has wonderful results. So we're just going to keep adding in that liquid over and over and over until it becomes the consistency that I want. We like a nice thick gravy. And you're not going to have to add very much seasoning to this at all because we already flavored the roast so heavily in the beginning. There we go. That's looking great. Still not quite as thin as I would like it, but we're about to the point where we can add in the little bit of seasoning. I ran out of broth, and so I just started adding water. That's totally fine to do. The more broth you add, the more flavor you're going to have, but we can always boost up the flavor. I'm going to add in some beef oxo cubes. I get these from England, but you can also use beef, and you don't even have to add them at all. We just like a very, very flavorful gravy. So I'm going to crush those up and add them into my sauce. If you are using oxo cubes, I have found that it's easier to add it in a little bit sooner in the stage of cooking the gravy, but this works too. And then of course a little bit more of my secret ingredient, Marmite. You can order the Marmite online, but you cannot order the oxo cubes, not the beef or the chicken. Those, we still have family in England and they send them to us usually for Christmas, which we very much appreciate. It's always a sad day in our house when we run out. So I thoroughly mix those things in, and then we're also going to add in a couple of other seasonings here. My rolls are ready. Now it's time to add in the rest of our seasoning. I add pepper, a little bit of salt, and onion powder, a touch more oregano. This is homegrown oregano, so I have to rub it between my fingers to make it a little bit more fine. And then of course we need to do a taste test. Before we can taste it, I forgot, I always add in just a touch of sugar. I have found when I add the Marmite, it can become very bitter, so I add a little bit of sugar to kind of help combat that. It's not a lot, just a touch. Thin it down to the exact thickness I'm wanting. Now we can do that taste test. Still needs a little bit more. Touch more sugar. Touch more salt. Stir it in thoroughly. One final taste. Perfect. Our rolls are done, our gravy's done, our roast is done. We are about ready to sit down and enjoy this meal. It's pretty quick, it's pretty simple, even though it takes all day long. It's pretty hands-off. If you're interested in any of these recipes, I'll link them down in the description for you.
Can I have a taste test? Ooh. Wow, this is really... This is really good.
As you can tell, this is a family favorite. Everybody loves Mommy's roast. I'm sure your family will enjoy it too.
I don't want Mommy driving. Mommy?
Maggie, please stop.
What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing then?
Absolute perfection. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, we would love for you to give us a thumbs up or subscribe. We'll see you again soon.